For the Director of Finance, Ms. Peralta.
Present.
Mr. Keeley.
Present.
Mr. Tang.
Present.
Ms. Yamamoto.
Here.
Ms. Bradford.
Here.
Ms. Hendricks.
Here.
Mr. Gunning.
Here.
For the State Treasurer, Mr. Henning.
Here.
For the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Mr. Delamini.
Present.
Mr. Juarez.
Here.
Chair Keeley, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Would you read the statement into the record, please?
Surely will.
Thank you.
The CalSTRS board meetings are live web streamed, video archived, and available to the public on calstrs.com. Individuals who wish to address the board should wait for the 10-minute public comment period at the end of the agenda item the speaker wishes to address. For comments not pertaining to a specific agenda item, there will be an opportunity for additional statements at the end of the open session. Each speaker is allowed a maximum of 3 minutes to comment. However, if there is not enough time for each speaker to have 3 minutes, the timing will be at the discretion of the chair. Please be advised, while criticism is protected, abusive language or other disruptive behavior that goes beyond protected speech and impedes the meeting's progress may result in the termination of further comment and/or removal if the behavior continues. To protect the privacy of speakers under the age of 18 who wish to address the board, only their first name and affiliated organization may be provided, but other personal identifying information, such as their last name, age, or school, may not be shared. Since the January Teachers Retirement Board meeting, CalSTRS received 1,825 form emails and 1 email urging CalSTRS to remain invested in companies and financial instruments connected to Israel. 439 form emails and 46 emails from members and non-members asking CalSTRS to divest from Caterpillar Inc., Elbit Systems, Lockheed Martin, and Palantir Technologies, as well as all Israeli banks and bonds. 1 email from a non-member asking CalSTRS to divest from Palantir, Google, and Microsoft. 174 form emails and 6 emails from members and non-members requesting CalSTRS divest from Tesla. 57 form emails regarding CalSTRS indirect investments in Sempra's LNG projects, and 1 form email asking CalSTRS to divest from Total Energies, China National Offshore Oil Company, and their subsidiaries. That's all I have, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. I'll entertain a motion to approve today's agenda, ideally with some flexibility.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Ms. Hendricks, seconded by Mr. Tang. Without objection, the agenda has been approved. Before we cue up the member video, I'd like to congratulate Mr. Gunning on your reappointment. We thank the administration for their wise choice, and we're thrilled to have you back, Michael. We're very fortunate to have you serve this board and give of your time and your expertise. So congratulations. If we could go to the member video.
Sometimes you make masterpieces, and sometimes it's just the process of making that is the joy. Currently, clay has my fascination because there's just so much to learn. Okay, and you can compress more. Squish it together like you mean it. Hi, my name is Katie Fries, and I am an artist. I teach at Placer High School in the ceramics department. In for you? Is that better?
Yeah.
So at 17, I decided that teaching was the thing I wanted to do. And in teaching, I realized that what I really had was some visual information I wanted to share. I did what was called intuitive painting. Then I started making jewelry, and then I started knitting and weaving and doing a variety of different modes. And the thing I loved to do was teach art. I subbed across the street, 47 steps from my door to the special ed classroom. For me, I felt like art was a gateway to working with people My students and I would make these elaborate Christmas gifts for their families. The creativity, once you get it kind of going, it sort of takes on a life of its own. So the man who had been in the ceramics position for 30 some years, he was retiring, and I thought, oh, I want to do that. And so I got the job, and I've been there teaching ceramics this is my 9th year. The pieces of art I've made for the public here in Auburn have been sponsored by the Arts Commission. Sierra to the Sea is a mosaic made out of tiles. That was a 2-year project. There's a river that runs through the downtown area. It's the art park. I made a sign for the pollinator garden that I created. This one that we're working on right now, the school park preserve. I also did the base of the Hillman for Placer High School. People would stop and encourage me along the way, and I was like, holy cow, public art is the best, because you can have the experience of making the thing, which is the joyful part for me. I love teaching. I love working with young people. So the most important thing for me is to make it very clear that they are artists. I see them as they are, and we will help them grow. I plan to retire on May 28th, last day of school. If I want to write children's books, I have several stories from playing with my grandchildren, and I kind of sing a lot of songs. I'll be able to go and help my daughter, who has a 2-year-old, and be her childcare and get to know my grandson a little bit better. And I want to do more public art. We're kind of excited to have that constant income from CalSTRS to be able to then make choices. It's having time to be creative for me if I'm not having to earn money for what I do, because I have funding through my pension. Then I can continue to be a volunteer here in the community with my artwork and help out. It was a windy path, but I landed on my feet. Ceramics has really, it still holds my attention. And even after I retire, I'll be playing with clay.
Well, thank you to Teresa and the communications team for another extraordinary video. If you'll just give me one moment, I wanted to share, I shared with some members of the team this morning. This past weekend, I had one of the most beautiful weekends that I can recall, certainly since the pandemic. And I attended a musical at my daughter's high school in Southern California. And for the last 3 or 4 months, almost 200 students, countless parent volunteers, and 3 incredible, heroic, beautiful adults, Miss Barraza, the theater coach, Mr. Hulls, the music and choir teacher, and Mr. Sakow, who teaches strings orchestra, have dedicated their time to put forth a musical, Hello, Dolly, at the high school in Southern California, a public high school with a lot of support in the community in the community in which we live. These kids, these young people, were amazing, talented, gifted. The teamwork they showed. The auditorium was full of joy and hope and love and kindness. It just moved me to a place where I thought to myself, I gotta share this, man. I have to share the good news about these educators, these parents, and these young people. So if you're in Southern California next weekend, Santa Monica High School, Hello, Dolly. The kids deserve a full house, nothing less. And to be able to be so connected with the educators in that community, and then to be able to serve in this capacity is something that I think is super special, because it really goes to why we were all here. And when you see people who connect so deeply with young people and are making a difference in their lives and changing the trajectory and creating memories for young people and their families that they'll remember the rest of their lives, that stuff is called priceless. So the least we can do is make sure that they have a secure retirement. And that's what this board is all about. That's what this organization is about. In a very crazy, chaotic, volatile world, there's a lot of goodness taking place, and a lot of it's taking place in California's public schools. So that's all I have to share. I needed to share that. My daughter would say, "Oh, Dad, that was like a soft pitch for encouraging people." Now, if you live up in Northern California, don't fly down to go see it. But if you're down there, I know there's some seats available. All right, Santa Monica High School. Hello, Dolly. Okay, Samantha, I think we've got some public comments.
We do have public comment. So we'll start in person. If we could get a 1.5 minute timer, please. Okay, our first public commenter will be Ruth, followed by Edward.
Hello again. I'm Ruth Rudetsky, retired teacher and CalSTRS member, back a year after I first came before you to ask you to sell Tesla before, 1, Elon Musk does more terrible things with our money, and 2, Tesla stock crashes. While you dither, here are a few of yesterday's headlines from Electrek, the biggest EV news site. Tesla loses Toyota and Stellantis from its EU CO2 pool, taking billions in regulatory credits with them. Elon Musk's XAI is undoing Tesla's climate work, all in the name of AI slop. Lithium shortages could hit by 2028 as EV demand surges, and that's just yesterday's news. There's been a steady stream of bad news about Tesla, but you still have $2 billion of our money invested in a manipulated meme stock. It's time to do your fiduciary duty rather than hiding behind it and sell Tesla. Maybe you'd make us a few more dollars on paper for a few months if you waited to sell Tesla until it crashes, but I don't see how that would help keep my pension fully funded. Sell Tesla now, please. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker will be Edward, followed by Sarah.
Thank you. Edward Hasbrook, CalSTRS beneficiary, here to ask you again to sell Tesla. You know, Elon Musk is still as much of a Nazi as ever, still as determined as ever to destroy all of the values, all of those things that Mr. Kiley was just telling us about, the CalSTRS and its members stand for. But over the last year, your gamble on the speculative stock of Tesla has continued to play out. Yet, I understand the temptation every gambler feels, especially when you've fallen behind and then your number comes up, to let your winnings ride. Roll again. Let the wheel spin. Hope your number keeps coming up and you can work yourself out of that hole. And that's a fallacy. And it's a fallacy in which almost every gambler loses when eventually their number doesn't come up and they lose everything they've won. You've been gambling on Tesla. It's a meme stock. It's speculative. It's highly risky. You may think you can keep gambling on it, but sooner or later, the question is not if, but when the stock price is going to crash. And the challenge for you is whether you as a board are going to be disciplined and prudent investors, wise enough to cash out your winnings while you're ahead and move on, or whether you're going to continue to gamble on Tesla until you lose. Please make the right choice.
Our next speaker will be Sarah, followed by Erica.
Hi, my name is Sarah Holtz, and I'm an organizer with OPEIU. CalSTRS owns $57 million in Teleperformance shares. OPEIU has been organizing ASL interpreters at Teleperformance subsidiary ZP Better Together and subsidiary Language Line, as well as Teleperformance US call centers in conjunction with CWA. Unfortunately, Teleperformance has been engaging in an aggressive campaign of union busting in recent months. 4 ZP ASL interpreters have been terminated, and 1 CWA call center member has been terminated as well. One of the interpreters let go is one of very few interpreters fluent in every dialect of Puerto Rican Sign Language, as well as ASL, English, and Spanish, and is extremely respected. We filed charges with the NLRB in 2 of these cases, and we'd be happy to share them with you. These actions are occurring despite the Uni Global Union's global agreement with Teleperformance, and Teleperformance has refused to implement this agreement in the United States and is openly flouting it. 72 members of Congress just wrote a letter to Teleperformance urging them to respect collective bargaining in the US. Without this service, the deaf community cannot communicate in their native language. The importance of having qualified and well-trained interpreters cannot be overstated. We believe it would be highly impactful if CalSTRS could urge Teleperformance to immediately stop union busting and rehire the fired workers. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker will be Erica, followed by Melinda.
Hello. The CalSTRS Divest campaign comes to the CalSTRS board to again demand that you divest from the $2.78 billion in entities profiting from Israel's genocide in Gaza and ethnic cleansing in the West Bank, starting with Palantir, Caterpillar, Lockheed Martin, Elbit Systems, Israeli banks, and Israeli bonds. Gaza and the West Bank reveal the economy of genocide, as UN Special Rapporteur Albanese illustrated in her July 2025 report, which is in turn built upon the militarism, imperialism, and dehumanization embedded in the global capitalist system. In Palestine, and by extension, Lebanon, Iran, Sudan, Congo, Mexico, Venezuela, Cuba, U.S. immigrant detention centers, and beyond, we see that the death, destruction, and destabilization sown by these companies harms the pension as a whole and contradicts CalSTRS' ESG policy that says unsustainable practices that hurt long-term profits are risks to the system. Genocide, apartheid, and militarism are unsustainable. We call upon the board members to urgently direct investment staff to investigate Israeli bonds, Israeli banks, Lockheed Martin, Palantir, Elbit, and Caterpillar
Thank you for
per
your comment.
ESG policy. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Melinda, followed by Alex.
Hello, I'm Melinda Starr, a retired teacher and CalSTRS member. The genocide in Gaza continues. An average of 5 Palestinians have died every day since the supposed ceasefire, for a total of 600 and counting. Lockheed Martin missiles rain down on Palestinians who Israelis target with Palantir's code. Caterpillar bulldozers demolish homes in the West Bank under surveillance from Elbit Systems, and settlers escalate their violent seizures of Palestinian land while attacks on Iran continue. Israeli bonds and banks underwrite this colonial project. Dispossessing Palestinians clearly goes against CalSTRS' ESG policies, risk factors about, quote, protecting established property rights. Since last May, we are continuing to demand that CalSTRS immediately investigate Israel bonds, Israel banks, Caterpillar, Lockheed Martin, Palantir, and Elbit Systems in accordance with the ESG policy.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker will be Alex, followed by Lori.
Hi, my name is Alex Day. I teach at Berkeley High School. I'm with the CalSTRS Divest campaign. Despite the scriptural claims of the U.S. ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, the Zionist state does not have any right to the West Bank, let alone quote-unquote Greater Israel. As the attack on Iran tries to assert U.S.-Israeli hegemony over the region with the complicity of the same companies profiting from the genocide in Gaza, CalSTRS has a legal obligation to uphold international law in the face of these grave violations in such cases as the bombing of the school in Minhab. On top of that, CalSTRS ESG policy says, quote, the system's investments impact other facets of the global economy and, if they detract from the likelihood and impact of global growth, they are not in the long-term interests of the fund. With the Strait of Hormuz closed, the oil shock alone from the U.S. and Israel's war of imperial aggression threatens the fragile global system of just-in-time production. As we saw during the COVID pandemic, even small interruptions to part of the supply chain can have cascading effects that derail the entire system. CalSTRS board, stand with Palestinians. Take a stand against the endless militarism of the U.S. and Israel, which threaten global stability. Again, we call upon the board members to direct investment staff to investigate Israeli bonds, banks, Lockheed Martin, Palantir, Elbit Systems, and Caterpillar per ESG policy. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker will be Lori, followed by David.
My name is Lori Wager. For 28 years, I worked as a teacher to help young children thrive. But now, as a retiree, I receive my monthly check dripping in the blood of over 50,000 children. Teachers don't want our pensions to be responsible for weapons and technology that destroy schools, murder children and teachers, and imprison hundreds more in Palestine. CalSTRS is obligated to adhere to your ESG policy, yet you clearly have not taken any serious action to do so. In time, our grandchildren will ask us what we did during these terrible times. Your investment choices have forced me and over 1 million California teachers to be complicit in genocide in Gaza and daily human rights abuses here in our country. You yourselves are complicit. Unfortunately, I don't have the power to change this, but you do. Do the right thing. Divest now.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker will be David.
Thank you. My name is David Mandel. I'm a neighbor, retired human rights attorney, and journalist. The events of the last week really have shown that a large majority, finally, of the American people and the world's people are opposed, are offended by what our government has been doing in Iran. Nobody is fooled by the constantly changing rationales, false rationales that are being proffered by Trump and his folks. We need to put an end to that war and to other wars that are happening around the world. They're happening in the interests of domination, control, and profit of the few, not the many. We need to get it. We need to find a way to stop them. I personally have been more involved for decades organizing against the Israeli occupation and the apartheid and genocide. I'm an American Jew. I've also lived in Israel for a long time. I'm an Israeli citizen. Those are other examples where the people have no interest in what is really has to happen to stop these wars. How do we do that? We do that by mass organizing. We do it electorally, and we do it through our money. Please, please divest as soon as you possibly can from the merchants of war and from the Israeli bonds.
Thank you for your comment.
Thanks.
That is the conclusion of public speakers for in person. We are now going to move to the phone. Our first speaker will be Mary Jo. Mary Jo, go ahead.
Citizen. Today, Tesla is the only member of the Magnificent Seven who reported earnings have declined since 2023. That's reported by Bloomberg News about a week ago. And Musk says that Tesla will now emphasize robots rather than passenger vehicles, sales which have suffered because of the stagnant production. Tesla is converting the factory in Fremont, where the Model X is made, and the Model S, to manufacturing hub for robots. So, you know, you probably bought Tesla because it's an environmentally friendly vehicle maker, but not anymore. They're into robots. And then there was this, reported by Thomson Reuters. Elon Musk described the merger of SpaceX and xAI, the rocket company, and the chatbot venture as, quote, scaling to make a sentient sun to understand the universe and extend the light of consciousness to the stars. Why would you trust $2 billion with a B dollars of your members' money to a person like that? Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker will be Diana.
Hello, my name is Diana Curiel. I'm a retired teacher and a CalSTRS member. I appreciate the hard work the board does to support all CalSTRS members. Recently, the Union of Concerned Scientists submitted a letter signed by more than 1,000 scientists to the EPA. The letter opposed the repeal of the endangerment finding, a scientific finding that global warming emissions endanger public health and the environment. The president of UCS published this statement, quote, today, Administrator Zeldin took a chainsaw to the endangerment finding, undoing this long-standing science-based finding on bogus grounds at the expense of our health. Ramming through this unlawful, destructive action at the behest of polluters is an obvious example of what happens when a corrupt administration and fossil fuel interests are allowed to run amok. The oil industry has known for decades that their fossil fuel products could cause catastrophic consequences, but they lied to the public to protect their profits. But as climate disasters intensify, big oil companies are lobbying Congress for blanket immunity from any laws or legislation that could hold them accountable. Meanwhile, tech giant Palantir is building tools for mass surveillance and has entered into an agreement with Israel to supply technology for Israel's war efforts. The CalSTRS sustainability web pages attest to CalSTRS' concern about climate change risks to the portfolio and the importance of long-term sustainable business practices. But the stewardship and engagement is useless without accountability.
Thank you for your comment.
It's time to divest from and war profiteers.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker will be Quinn.
Hello, my name is Quinn, and I'm the Executive Director at Fossil Free California. First of all, I'm here to thank you for the step that you took to reduce your fossil fuel investments by moving 20% of your portfolio into low carbon investments this past year. This is really a notable step in the right direction and demonstrates your commitment to reducing the risk that fossil fuels pose in your portfolio. I'd love to meet with you to discuss this strategy further and hear what your plans are moving forward. I'm also here alongside many other teachers today to demand that you stop investing in fossil fuels and in genocide. I know that you at CalSTRS are committed to sustainability, as demonstrated by the Low Carbon Investment Initiative. But I must ask, can you really in good conscience continue to invest in companies that are supplying weapons for mass murder and in the fossil fuel industry, such as in Chevron, who is urging the U.S. to commit these atrocities on their behalf, as we've seen in Venezuela, Gaza, and beyond? What we're seeing in Iran now is demonstrating how deeply the U.S.'s repeated atrocities in the Middle East are driven by controlling oil. Just a few years ago, the former head of the CIA and Army General Petraeus said when speaking about the MAGA strategy, well, we're going to conquer 7 Near Eastern countries, culminating in Iran in relation to controlling oil. This is awful. And we're seeing this play out now as war breaks across the Middle East around controlling oil, bombing.
Thank you for your comment.
And thank you.
Our next speaker will be Forrest, followed by Carla. Forrest, go ahead. We will come back to Forrest. Our next speaker will be Carla, our next speaker will be Carla.
Good morning. My name is Carla Schick. I am a retired teacher and a Jewish American, and I have watched as teachers for many, many months. I've been calling on CalSTRS to divest from genocide. During this time, hundreds, if not thousands, of Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank have been murdered. While this is no longer front page news, you can follow this on any social media, including the Substack of Mossab Abu Toha, the Pulitzer Prize winner and poet from Gaza, who is a refugee in the United States. It is not sufficient to say that you are against genocide. Actions to put pressure to end the genocide must be taken. It is not sufficient to be a bystander to genocide. As I continue to watch videos of Gaza in ruins, as I see the people of Gaza trying to just survive, and I get my retirement check each month to buy food, to have heat, to have a quality life, I know that I cannot be silent. As a Jewish American, I was taught that no one stood by us. We should not be repeating history. We are asking that you sell your investments in Israel via their Israel bonds and the corporations that sell weapons and surveillance equipment, including the surveillance of those exercising their free speech rights in the United States, namely Elbit, Palantir, Caterpillar, and Lockheed Martin. Our ESG principles require that CalSTRS invest for a sustainable future for ourselves and our children, divest from militarism. We will not benefit from this, and it is killing the world.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker will be Jonas, followed by Mia. Jonas, go ahead.
I didn't hear a name. Are you talking about me?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, my bad. So my name is Jonas Lemaitre Brownell. I am a hospital teacher in Berkeley, California with the Berkeley Federation of Teachers. You know, CalSTRS has over $28 million invested in Israel bonds. And this Israel is has been committing genocide for several years now. Why are we investing in genocide? So many people have been speaking so well this morning. You know, for all this investment in genocide, what are we getting? CalSTRS profited almost $180. That's it in 2025 from all of their investments in the Israel bonds. So is it about investment or is it about supporting Israel no matter what they do? That's not, I think, what we, the people, want. Please listen to the children of Manab who can't speak anymore. That's very, very likely Israel bombed Manab. They have a plan now. Now we learn they want to do the Gaza approach to Iran. They want to carpet bomb to turn the people against the government. Mass atrocities we should not be investing in. Please stop it.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Mia, followed by Megan.
Good morning, CalSTRS board members. My name is Mia McIver. I'm the Executive Director of the American Association of University Professors, or AAUP. Before joining AAUP, I taught at UCLA and UC Irvine as a faculty member for 15 years. On January 20th of this year, AAUP raised concerns with this board about a fiduciary conflict if CalSTRS continues to invest in Apollo Global Management companies. Last year, Apollo's chairman and CEO, Mark Rowan, was the driving force behind the Trump administration's so-called Compact for Academic Excellence in Higher Education, which sought to exert partisan control over academic and administrative aspects of universities nationwide. More recently, Rowan has publicly taken credit for the Title VI strategy that led to the $1 billion Trump administration demand of UCLA and the subsequent Department of Justice lawsuit against UCLA. Rowan's actions harm the faculty, staff, and students of California's public colleges and universities. Consequently, they undermine the integrity of California's public education system. This extended and continuing harm deepens the fiduciary conflict for CalSTRS. We strongly urge you to refrain from investing any additional assets with corporations in Apollo's portfolio. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker will be Megan, followed by Christina. Megan, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I need a minute.
Okay, I'm going to put Megan back in the queue. We'll come back to you. Our next speaker will be Christina, followed by Kathleen.
Hi, my name is Christina. I am a middle school teacher. I've been a CalSTRS member for 11 years. I'm also Palestinian. I'm calling in regards to the CalSTRS Divest campaign, calling to ask y'all to drop the bonds, the Israeli bonds that you all currently own, and to refrain from buying any more. They are proving to be a bad investment. They generally are worth less than what you all paid for them. Their interest rates are lower than the general, than the S&P and the market. They barely make up for inflation. There's not really a good financial reason for why CalSTRS would be investing in Israeli bonds, which leads me to assume that there's only a political reason why you guys are buying Israeli bonds. Israeli bonds were invented as a way to basically fund the apartheid state, to fund the Israeli government in a time of economic vulnerability. And they are marketed in that way as a commitment to support the Zionist state. And so if you don't have a fiduciary reason for buying these, it clearly is a political reason, which goes against quite a few of their policies. Additionally, I just want to point out that the war on Iran, it is a U.S.-Israeli war on Iran. The mainstream media is not talking about Israel's role here, but they've been talking about wanting to take down Iran for decades. And so we're just investing in regional instability.
Our next speaker will be Kathleen, followed by David.
Hello, this is Kathleen Bolton-Schmuckler. I'm a current member of STRS. I've been teaching in Contra Costa County for almost 20 years now, and I'm calling to demand that the board divest from genocide, including Palantir, Elbit Systems, Israeli Bonds, Caterpillar, and now Tesla. And I just wanted to say that, CalSTRS, you did divest from apartheid South Africa back in the day, and you still are making our retirement funds happen, so thank you for that. And I have trust that you have the financial capacity, as well as the ethical one, to make our money work for us in ways that doesn't destroy the planet or young people around the globe. Thank you for your time and your consideration to this matter, and I look forward to hopefully being on the right side of history with my retirement money and being able to look my students in the face every day as I teach them and not feel like a hypocrite. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker will be David, followed by Jennifer.
Hi, my name is David Allegorin. My wife is a retired teacher, and her CalSTRS pension is a critical part of our retirement income. Years ago, we purchased some Tesla stock for our personal portfolio. Recently, our financial advisor advised us to sell our Tesla stock as Elon Musk has become erratic and Tesla has become a very risky investment. I'm urging CalSTRS to also divest because we count on our pension from CalSTRS to live on, and we don't want to have any of our pension invested in Tesla stock because it's so unreliable as an investment. And just like Tesla owners who now put a bumper sticker on the car saying, "I bought this car before Elon went crazy," I think it's the same thing with investments. CalSTRS invested in Tesla stock before Elon went crazy, but now he's crazy. He's dumping cars. He wants to invest his resources into sketchy investments in robots and robo-taxis, which are unreliable and are bad for the environment. And I urge you, please, to dump your Tesla stock now and do a favor for all the hardworking teachers who are living on their CalSTRS pensions. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker will be Jennifer, followed by Paula.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jennifer. I've been a CalSTRS member for the past 14 years, and I'm a current high school history teacher in the Los Angeles area. My call here today is, as many have said, just a call on the investment committee, you all, the board, to explicitly and immediately direct the investment staff to divest from Israeli bonds, Israeli banks, Palatari Technologies, Albit Systems, and Caterpillar now. We don't want you guys buying more Israeli bombs. Investing in these bombs provides direct support for the Gaza genocide and ethnic cleansing of Palestine. And just in general, like investing in war and genocide directly contradicts with your commitment to sustainability. And again, as my morals as a teacher, as an ethnic studies teacher, I teach my students to be very critical of the systems and ways our society, treats others. And this would be directly contradicting what I'm teaching my students. So if you really could, I'm calling to divest from these pieces and break, and in addition, it feels like it's breaking trust with myself and members as, you lose credibility continuing to do this. So thank you. And I really, really call that you guys divest in these funding. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker will be Paula, and then we will circle back to Forrest.
Thank you. My name is Paula Rainey. I'm retired, worked into schools in the past, and I want to echo what others have already clearly stated. There's every reason to divest from all Israeli bonds and all the toxic companies that have been listed by so many of the previous speakers. Our money needs to work for us. I hope you will take my remarks to heart and be sure that there is divestment from all these Israeli bonds and all these toxic companies. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker will be Forrest, followed by Megan.
Gracias. Hi. Spain is denying the United States the right to use its air bases for bombing campaigns against Iran. Our country, seemingly under the whims of a despot, has said that we are cutting off trade. In the long run, this will not hurt Spain. Some profited off the development and use of napalm in Vietnam. Today, those people are reviled. The voices of the people were unprecedentedly massive in their opposition to the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Now, in the long run, even the politicians say that this was a mistake. CalSTRS claims to keep in mind the long run, the big picture. You claim to plan ahead. As the world strides towards a nuclear World War III, teachers in California are saying no. We don't want to take part in this destruction of life. Gazans are not bulldozing our neighborhoods into dust, and we are not. But yet we are bulldozing theirs. This insanity must stop, and you must stop obliging the complicity of educators who are striving for a peaceful and educated world built upon love. Last Saturday, 165 people were murdered. Imagine that here. Mostly schoolgirls between the ages of 7 and 12 were killed in an attack on the Good Tree, a girls' elementary school in Iran. That's as large as the entire 7th grade class at the school I work at. Get our money out of this cycle of death now. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker will be Megan.
Hi, my name is Megan Adams. I'm a school bus driver, a daughter of 2 lifetime educators, and I'm also the Peace and Freedom Party candidate for state controller. I'm joining the call that many others have spoken on this call this morning to demand that CalSTRS immediately investigate and divest from genocidal investments such as Palantir, Albit Systems, Caterpillar, Lockheed Martin, and all of the Israeli bonds and banks. Every day that this board delays this order is another violation of your own ESG investment policy. The genocide in Palestine is ongoing, and the Trump administration is taking us right now into new wars, and ICE has been brutalizing and murdering people on the streets here. The money of our teachers, those who commit themselves to supporting the youth, who are our future, is being invested in this death and terror. And teachers do not want their pensions responsible for the death of children, whether they live in Palestine, here in the US, or anywhere in the world. You have the ability to change that. I hope you take action immediately and divest now. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. That is the conclusion of public comment for item 2.
Thank you for the support, Samantha. Thank the public for their comments today. We'll take a 5-minute recess and come back in 5 minutes. There's a couple of logistics. One is we have 2 items. We'll have the CIO report and then the shared vision report. Then we're going to take a 15-minute break, so we have a 15-minute break. Then we're going to come back and we have the semi-annual reports and open session. Just a reminder, we also have quite a bit of time in closed session today. So that's a great opportunity for us to talk with our staff and our consultants about specific issues that are appropriate for closed session. So keep that in mind as we're going through the semi-annuals in open session, that's really the high level of each asset class, its performance over the short, medium, and longer term. And then one last logistical point. It's my preference that when staff and our consultants are presenting and there are PowerPoint presentations, that we go through the PowerPoints and then we go to questions and answers rather than throughout the presentations. So unless there's a real pressing issue and then you need to stop and get clarification, we can do that. But ideally, I think the meeting will run more efficiently if we allow the presentations first, followed by questions. With that, Scott, I'll turn it over to you. Good to see you this morning.
Thank you. Good morning, members of the Investment Committee. Great to see everyone. Since this is the semi-annual performance review meeting, let me just start off with performance. CalSTRS generated a solid 13% return over the last year with assets under management of $392 billion for the calendar year ending December 31st, 2025. Most importantly, CalSTRS returns continue to be at a rate that exceeds and is above the rate needed to achieve our mission of securing the retirement future of our over 1 million teachers. For all the periods of returns that have been consistently above our 7% actual return hurdle, with 9.9% annualized returns over the 3-year period, 7.7% over 5 years, 9% over 10-year, and 7.7% over the 30-year periods, respectively. CalSTRS performance has also exceeded our policy benchmark by about 60 basis points over the 3, 5, and 10-year periods, respectively. So let me just acknowledge the great work of the investment staff, the investment committee, the organization, our consultants, all in achieving this solid result. While I'm proud of our results, that was the past, and we really need to focus on the future and position ourselves for that future. The best, now I'm looking at Steve here because he likes analogies. The best analogy I could think of for the meeting is or come up with is watching the surface of the ocean before a potential tide shift. So on the surface, the economy and the markets seem to be doing well. But below the surface, powerful currents are moving in opposing different directions that could eventually either magnify that tide or reverse the tide. So what are we seeing on the surface level today? Well, an equity bull market that has been driven by GDP growth, underpinned by, as you know, a massive spend on AI CapEx, which is now spreading to other portions of the economy in terms of this capital spending. Earnings growth has been very strong. But what are we seeing below the surface, importantly? Powerful opposing underlying currents, any of which, again, could either magnify that tide or change the direction of it. One long-term risk is that it's not been a bull market for everyone. It's been a K-shaped recovery with some big beneficiaries and some losers. Housing prices, they're so high, it's making it very difficult for that American dream of owning a home. The younger generation are entering the job force with fewer opportunities. On the other side, we've got AI and the transformation of technology. It really has the potential to beneficially transform companies, sectors, countries, but it could also potentially create a greater shift of the winners and losers. A job transition is in the offing. Geopolitical risk has increased dramatically as we watch yet another conflict unfold in Iran. And we're living more and more in a multipolar world. What is best in each of the country's interests versus the unilateral one? Fiscal policy and greater government intervention, that's something that I and my team are focusing a lot more of. It's really increased in terms of the amount of attention we spend on these issues. We're seeing different political alliances and trade alliances, deglobalization and a rewriting of the supply chain, onshoring or nearshoring. Capital flows, I think, will follow that long term. we're dealing at the same time with deficits. So the balance between fiscal policy, the central bank policy, is causing the potential for a lot greater interest rate volatility. The bottom line to me is this. All of these underlying currents have the potential to produce much greater volatility across markets in the future. Now, that's both something that you can read into for the investment team as an opportunity set, because with greater volatility, there'll be greater differentiation, but it's also a risk. And so my keys for CalSTRS portfolio are three pillars. Number one is diversification. Our portfolio is diversified and we need to maintain that discipline over time. Number two, we need to more and more become dynamic in our allocation across where and when we can. And the third is liquidity management. In a crisis, having the liquidity to deploy capital. CalSTRS One Fund approach, which we'll start to talk in dialogue more and more about, it really seeks to improve on these three elements that I talked about. How we dynamically allocate an incremental dollar of capital to both diversify the portfolio while also maximizing returns. In one example, you heard us talk about the annual asset allocation plan. One of the areas that the staff highlighted was to increase capital into asset-backed private credit. So if you think about infrastructure, assets, and private credit, they're less cyclical. They provide more diversification, more stability across different types of cycles in the CalSTRS portfolio. But the return is very similar to other forms of private credit. So we're diversifying the portfolio and maximizing the returns at the same time, trying to allocate the portfolio in better and better ways. As another example, staff, as you know, has been enhancing our liquidity tools in the event of corrections. So when there is a crisis, you've heard me say this before, having that cash and that liquidity is really as good as gold, because we need that liquidity to mitigate risks, to rebalance the portfolio, and also to pursue opportunities when the markets are discounted 30, 40, 50%. So we've expanded our liquidity tools and formalized a liquidity policy, which thankfully with the investment committee, you've approved. So let me just pause here and take any questions.
Scott, I don't see any, so why don't you just continue? You can continue.
Great. Well, so no, that concludes my comments for the, unless there's questions.
There aren't any thoughts from Stephanie or Stephen? See you sitting in front. Anything? Okay, great. Thank you very much, Scott. Appreciate it. The next item is the item 4, which is the Shared Vision Research Insights. And members of the team are going to come up and be part of that presentation. So if they could come up now. And as they're coming up, Scott, I want to applaud you for the approach that you've taken as we hired you as our CIO a couple of years ago. This shared vision speaks volumes about your collaborative style of leadership. I want to applaud you and everyone who has interviewed the members of the board, key members of the investment staff, to come together with our shared vision. And I know there's 3 key phases to the shared vision process, and then you're going to highlight the 5 themes that came out of this. But there are a lot of hours, a lot of effort has gone in to really collectively come up with what is the shared vision for us as we look forward. So kudos to you, Scott, for taking this approach to creating the vision for us as we move forward. With that, Geraldine, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Do you have the clicker, Geraldine? Or I do. And let me, in turn, start with appreciating Geraldine Jimenez, who is a senior investment director. You know her as head of public markets, but as part of my senior management team, this is one of the projects that she is leading, as well as thanking Mosaic for their work in helping to facilitate a lot of what we've done here. But let me just step back and say, why shape a shared vision? While we've been successful, we just talked about performance and achieving solid performance in the past, The shared vision seeks to answer the question of how we plan to do that in the future. It's forward-looking, and all the best organizations I know create a vision for that future. Given the magnitude and the number of tectonic shift, I talked about those underlying currents in the ocean. This is an even more important exercise today than I think it ever has been. So at the heart, you see in this circle graph, at the heart of the effort is CalSTRS' mission, securing the financial future, sustaining the trust of CalSTRS educators. Our shared vision must lead us to fulfilling that mission and achieving our investment goals. But the vision complements the mission, it complements our goals because it's answering the question of how we continue to be a top global allocator. It's critical for us to understand what areas do we need to maintain, what areas do we need to build to compete in a shifting global landscape. And it works hand in hand with our mission, it works hand in hand with our goals to complete this framework on how can we succeed in the future. So where do we start? I believe, as Harry was articulating, it's really my job to lead the organization forward with the vision, but it's all of our jobs to create it. We all have vested interests. We're all here as one greater CalSTRS team. So it's shared. The strength of any vision for CalSTRS' future relies on the ownership and alignment across the organization. The investment committee is a huge part of that. The executive staff, our consultants, all of the investment staff. So let me just move on to slide 2 here. And there's a lot on the slide. I'm going to defer talking about the timeline to later, but maybe just refreshing the project and describing the phases that we've outlined this. So phase 1 was a listen and engagement phase. So again, starting point is to me internally, how are we thinking about internally our strengths and weaknesses? How do we characterize being a top allocator? And we designed a systematic way to gather feedback, interviewing the investment committee staff, executive staff, our consultants, and even our stakeholders. We're nearing the end of that, and this is going to be part of the focus of this meeting, talking about the findings. But let me just talk about phase 2, which we'll be heading into. So we'll take these findings that Geraldine will talk to today and the divisional reviews and synthesize them into recommendations for a shared vision statement, strategic actions, and best practices. Ultimately, these are strategic actions you've talked us, maybe think about them in 3 ways. 1 are our branch strategic priorities that we've talked about. Technology transformation, we'll be needing to build technology. The one fund approach, we'll be building units like the Total Fund Management Division. We'll bring together the visions from our divisions. And all of this will be tied into and integrated into the entire CalSTRS strategic plan, headed and recommended by Cassandra, but approved by the board. And this culminates into phase 3, which is investment staff, I and the senior management team in particular, will recommend to you a vision. In that, we are going to create together a bold goal. And you can think about that similar to as we entered the phase of the collaborative model, we had certain goals there to achieve. It was a stretch goal, but I think it's important to make it very tangible so we have something to measure both on a staff and an investment committee level. But let me just stop here and hand it off to Geraldine, because I think what you're really going to want to hear of is, after interviewing all these groups internally, what are the 5 characteristics that it was pretty, not easy to discern, but I think it became obvious. So, Geraldine?
Hello. Yes, thank you, Scott. Really enjoyed pulling this all together. We spent about 9 months in this listen and engage phase, and key to it was Amy McDuffie and the Mosaic team bringing it all together. So what I'm going to share with you is not my opinion, and that's not Scott's opinion. It's an aggregation of everyone we listened to So as you know, you probably are one of them that you met with Scott and he talked with you, got your input on what does it look like to be a top allocator. So, maybe doing great today, but what does tomorrow look like? The environment's going to change. What do you define as success? What are the risks and the opportunities for CalSTRS? So all this input came in with these various groups. And you can see the investment branch staff, not only did they have a survey, then we had focus groups. So 74 were actually sat down and in team environments, small environments, talked with Mosaic and team about these challenges and opportunities and what does it mean to be competitive. So we're trying to really pick up nuggets from across the board. We had an CalSTRS executive staff meeting too, got their input, senior management team, and then specifically just the leaders in the CalSTRS investment branch. What are their inputs? All the board consultants, peer insights. September, you were here when we brought in SWIB, Ontario Teachers, and Australian Super. We got their insights, and then also member and employer groups. And what I'm going to share with you today, I actually did share with the CAC yesterday, the Client Advisory Council. So right now, everything I'm going to share with you, I'm sharing back with all of these groups that gave the input because we heard them and it's been summarized. I always kind of joke there's like almost 100-page document with all these details. But I think Mosaic did a fine job at grouping into these 5 categories that have some very important signals and areas for us to think about and focus on. So I'm going to go through these 5 areas to help you define what did we find and what did we learn a top allocator would look like, and that these groups, their input showed. So these are the 5 areas, and I'm going to go through a little detail on each one of them, then you can ask questions later if it doesn't make sense to you. But hopefully some of this resonates with you. You say, yeah, I get that. That makes sense. That seems reasonable. So the first one, and Scott already mentioned what our mission is, a top allocator is mission-driven. They know exactly what they're focused on. They know what their North Star is. They have conviction and focus on what they are doing. They are able to take advantage of opportunities to lead them to that mission and respond in the short-term market environment. So what are our strengths? We do have a well-known governance. It's we're in statute. We're really clear who we're here to serve. And we've heard time and again from staff, they feel that mission is really important to them. They're here to serve the teachers. So that is a strength. And we have strong delegated authority that you've already passed down to the CEO, CIO, and we have a lot of authority to act and transact. So what are our challenges? It is challenging. We get a lot of different input on where we should go by the various public groups, and we're trying to stay on the mission. So how do we interact with that, engage with that? Balancing reportability and accountability. We are a public entity. We have to be accountable to stakeholders, the legislature, the public, that will always be there, that will always be needed. That being said, we're in a competitive environment where not all of those we're competing with have the same challenges. So that's a challenge for CalSTRS and something we have to think about. Okay, world-class talent. So we're able to attract and retain sophisticated, creative investors from around the world. So we invest around the world. We have to have knowledge, expertise from people from around the world that understand the global markets. We need to be creative, be able to lean into opportunities, be innovative, flexible. We need diverse teams with backgrounds that bring us together and able to think us beyond traditional boxes, if you will. So what are our strengths? Again, this is all from the people we surveyed, right? So broad input. We do have a talented team with longevity. We have strong succession planning. You've obviously seen that and supported that playing out, but it's going to continue playing out as our team retires and moves on. And we have a culture of excellence. And this is really what spoke to me. It was from the employee input. We're collaborative, we're collegial. We have a balance in our work life and how we lean in. And we're inclusive. So we already have a strong foundation in our current team that we can build on. So what are our opportunities? Further aligning staff and evolving. We need to hire more and we need to continue hiring. We need to think about the global marketplace and the global expertise we need. We need specialized resources and technology in all of these various markets, private market structures. We need legal expertise to help us with these complex structures. If we're going to invest around the world, we need more operational infrastructure to build out those abilities to invest. In short, we still have a path ahead to build this team. Smart execution. That's kind of a cute way of saying it, but really, if you think about it, it's technology. We have such a complex portfolio. We need smart technology. We need that technology to support our decision-making. So a top allocator would be able to leverage this data and technology to envision and enable risk-taking. Basically leaning in, Scott, I just talked to you about, we need to be able to dynamically allocate. Well, to do that, we need to know all of our positioning in real time. We need a lot of data. We need to be able to, if we have high conviction strategies, how do we take advantage of them and where do we lean in? We need to be able to innovate and scale. So again, as we keep growing, we need to do more of what we're already doing. So CalSTRS strength, we already have a strong track record. That's proven out. There's one thing in the investment world you can't hide is your track record's there. So the data's there. We've done it. And we've been innovative. We've come a long way. And we're collaborative. We work together. Again, from even the team, if we need to make a decision, we come together, we make decisions, and we're able to move forward. So opportunities, well, data and technology, I know you've been hearing about it. And, our staff in the survey, 64% said that is the greatest risk we face going forward is our lack of technology. We need to improve this. We are competing in an environment where people do have this technology, and we want to be competitive with them. So we need to expand that, and we need to expand how we use technology and focus on solutions that build out this, not only the data, but how we solve our investment strategies. So organizational agility. So a top allocator would have a team structure that balances flexibility, autonomy with centralization to a changing landscape. So what does that mean? We have the asset classes that you're familiar with, able to make decisions, and we can make decisions also at the top line. So we're growing beyond just each asset class making a decision, and we need to bring it together. We need to be working with a broader CalSTRS an organization to lean into operational challenges and to respond to the market environment. So our strength, we already have a strong leadership, and we have proven that we're able to respond in market environments. We do have a distributed leadership. We've heard that from the staff time and again. They feel empowered to make decisions, and they can act on it. And we're inclusive. We can come together and make decisions together. And we have respect and trust, again, from the staff that really spoke to me. That's really important for an environment to go forward and face challenges. So challenges, creating the capacity to navigate. We're going to grow. We're going to double our AUM probably in the next 10 years for sure. So how do we manage that? How do we come together as a team and lean into that? We need visionary thinking, which is really what this project is about, right? If we keep doing the same thing, we'll probably fall behind. We need to go forward and be more creative and build out these areas that we're seeing are challenges. We need to be efficient in the way we operate. We need to be nimble and respond. We hear a lot of times from our partners that we need to be able to be responsive and lean in sometimes within days to opportunities when they come to us. We need to have the infrastructure and the ability to lean in. And that's how we're going to optimize our returns and manage risks in this environment that's fast-paced. And finally, partner of choice. So a top allocator would be the first call. So if there are opportunities, we're not 6 months into it before we get that call. They've been picked off by then. We need to maintain influence in the market to affect and get the deals that we think are best, and we need to be a thought leader. So strength, we have a positive reputation, and we have brand recognition. The doors are open to us at this point. Hopefully they continue to be open to us and that we can take advantage of those best opportunities. And we do have valuable partnerships. We feel like we are the first call in many instances. So how do we keep that up? So opportunities for improving, speed of execution. I already said we do it, but we need to do more of it. And we're going to get larger and our teams will be larger. So how do we respond to that? We'll need more partnerships. With our AUM doubling, we need more of the same. So we basically need to do more of what we've already been doing to continue to be that partner of choice. All right, Scott, I'm going to hand it over to you. Whoop.
Great. Thank you. I think that, and hopefully you're beginning to sense the power of, defining what this is to us and what it means. What are our strengths and what are our opportunities? Really starts to give us a lot sharper view on this vision. But, what the senior management team and I will do from here is define, discuss, and develop, which broadly, we're going to work with you to take these insights and really that we've shared today and build it into an investment branch vision. We're going to create specific objectives and hopefully, again, create a bold goal similar to the collaborative model without, stating it here. That is a stretch goal and hopefully unifies the organization, aligns everyone around what we can achieve in the future with this shared vision. We're going to create a long-term strategy, which is going to be incorporated and tied together, integrated fully with the strategic plan of the entire organization. But I want to pause here too and just say this is an iterative process, right? We're going to go through the next 3 to 4 board meetings, and here's the timeline to unpack this. So during the May IC, the senior team and I will spend time moving our findings closer to shared vision and aligning the investment committee around a bold goal. In the July offsite, the senior team again in Mosaic will facilitate a deeper dive with the investment committee and the investment senior team to really kind of iterate around this. And then in September, we'll bring a first reading of the shared vision to the investment committee with hopefully in November it all being approved. Again, this is something that the investment committee owns. And so we'll bring this for approval then. We'll pause here and I know there could be some questions. It was a hot topic during our briefings, but.
Terrific. Thank you, Geraldine and Scott. A great presentation and great set of materials, very clear. Let's go to Steve Juarez and then Sharon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have an observation and a question. The observation is that when we see ourselves as partners of choice, that there are certain limitations we have. I discussed this with Scott. Because we have public disclosure requirements in the private equity world, there's a lot of people that won't choose us just because they realize that their business might become exposed to the light of day. And so we just have to recognize that, I think, as a reality, that while we want to be the partner of choice for everyone, we can't. So we just have to focus on those people that aren't so concerned with that limitation. The question has to do with when we get our first set of goals, what do you sense is the first timeline when we'll evaluate how we're doing against those goals? And I'll tell you partly the reason I'm asking is that some of us may have a short shelf life on this board because if we don't get reappointed or whatever else might happen. So I'm just curious whether or not, will it be in that first year after, I assume, November, that we would, November of 2027, that we'd get some sense of how we're doing?
Yeah, I would say that, with all things, it's going to take time to take hold. And this was meant to be, looking forward to, 5 or 10 years. There's going to be both metrics that I would call more of like KPI, what are the key performance indicators, what are the milestones to get us there, and then the actual quantitative measure. I would caution people on the quantitative measure. I mean, looking back as we were thinking of just using the collaborative model as an analogy, we started with, something near 100 million or so in run rate savings. We had maybe 100 collaborative model investments. We're north of, I think, 450 today with north of 400 million in savings, but that was over a stretch of 5 to 6 years. So it's going to take time to move the numbers. And that's also a good thing because we're progressing. In other words, this isn't about us doing something radically different. It's an evolution of what we do. And we're doing a lot of things, if you look at the performance, successful today. So we need to maintain that and we want to build on it, right? And that's a progression. It takes time. So anyways, hopefully I answered the question. Geraldine?
This will be more of a qualitative, but we will have outcomes where we have initiatives that you will see worked on within our strategic plan, and you'll see progression reported to you. So again, not the quantitative I think you're asking about, but a qualitative. Are we working through these? So the technology, are we working through them? What did we promise to work through, and are we doing it? So you will see that on an ongoing basis.
Okay. Sharon?
Well, I have a similar, a couple questions, but the first question I had was around metrics. And one of the things I love about just our CalSTRS, broad strategic plan, which I wish, our districts and stuff had such a precise strategic plan, because it's really clear what our goals are, what our vision are, and then there's metrics to measure it. So it's good to hear that that's, I get your point, Geraldine, that you don't want to be stuck on numbers, but I do think, along with Steve's question, it's helpful for the board to see our progress. And so however we can do that in real time, I guess, as you report back, it's just helpful to see. A couple of things stuck out to me as you were presenting, Geraldine, and I really appreciate I love the way this was organized, because it's very clear, but world-class talent, data and technology, and agility. Those were the things that popped out for me as you were presenting. And what I was reflecting on is, in my experience with investment, staff, I think we have world-class talent, of course. But it just seems like that world is evolving, and the data technology piece, the agility piece, it just seems like it could require our current staff to also evolve and be trained or gain new skills. And then obviously, I think I guess my question is, are we at a place where we will attract the talent that we need, that have maybe more data technology background, kind of are more experienced in kind of that, I don't want to say quick, because that's not a CalSTRS, we take time, but that agility for deal making. So I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about attracting staff that have, not that our current staff doesn't have it, but it's that the world is evolving in the investment world, and how can we attract world-class talent that have some of those skills you mentioned?
Sure, I'll start off, and maybe you can add some elements. It's interesting that you double-clicked on those three, because if I were to think about the mission and being a partner of choice, I would put that more as like, we need to maintain that into the future, because those are clear strengths, and there may not be as many opportunities to improve. But these three areas would be my top three, in terms of where they're the greatest opportunities. For world-class talent, I do think that we have a lot of strengths in attracting that, because we are on the forefront of finance at large scale. That's pretty attractive. Most obviously, I think we've talked about this, people love to come here for the mission. They want to do that, right? That's a choice. Our culture is very, very strong, and is an attraction, and it keeps people, it retains people. That being said, I think in the future, we'll probably be tackling more and more the twin challenges of both location and where do people actually want to work. We've partly done that through opening up the San Francisco office, which has been a great advantage for us to recruit. And the second one is continuing the discussions around compensation as that evolves in the investment management industry, which it has been evolving too. And so I think those are twin challenges. Technology, we have been, I think, becoming more of a destination place for that. And with our investment data services team within investments, I think that we do have some firepower there in terms of the compensation that is necessary to attract, at a very minimum, the right individuals to come in. Because as we think about that area, the future could be that more of the portfolio is managed with a technology component to it, right? And so it not only is attracting the right individuals, but it's a training it's an area of training, which I think is attractive to most people too. Like when they come here, we're going to be focused on training all of our staff from the top to lowest. And that's different than what used to happen, right? When you rolled out the next Microsoft's, advancement, there's no, how many people needed, advanced training. But this is something different where you need to be an expert because you're essentially going to be incorporating that into, your investment management. I think that's both an attraction but a challenge, right? We have to get the right people, move the mass, but then train folks. And I think the training in particular is going to be very attractive to people as we do that. The other area, organizational agility. This is, the best way that I think about this is that we are becoming larger and more complex in how we invest. And so if you think about that, what is supporting investments, you need more dedicated resources, you need specialized resources, you need that speed to market. And there's a certain amount of complexity that then spills over to the rest of the organization. And one of the findings that I think Mosaic probably will speak to more in the future is that if we looked at our US peers and we looked at our international peers, maybe 80 to 85% of our US peers already have dedicated resources that are specialized in these areas, and 100% of the international competition just about. So we've got to kind of meet that opportunity head on. It's not necessarily recreating the wheel. A lot of our peers have already moved in that direction. But the path that we take, could be different. But we've identified at least the opportunities. And so it's interesting that you identified those three because those are my three, in terms of where are the greatest opportunities for us in the future to build.
So to add to that, I was at an event last week with a lot of large public funds, and they were struggling with the same challenge is technology's in such demand, but to get technology and investment knowledge where they're overlapping is very difficult and very competitive. And that's the environment we need to function in.
I would love to hear more at some point, not today, obviously, but like on the investment, I think you said investment data team, and then just maybe more insight into kind of the training that you're looking at for the data and technology. I'd be curious to hear more about that at some point. So thanks, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome, Ms. Hendricks. Any other committee members' questions or comments? I don't see any. Just a couple of observations. One would be a suggestion, the 5 themes that have surfaced. I'll leave it to communications and people who are creative, the creative types. It'd be great to have visual reminders throughout, at least where we operate, reminding us of what these themes are. It could be just a frame with theme 1, and just, for me, it's helpful that it just doesn't reside in the document, but as we're thinking about, and you and the team are working towards this over the next many years, we continually go back to what the themes are, and that it's shared and we have ownership over it. So what I love about the item, amongst other things, is that it's very forward-looking. It's acknowledging that which has worked for us in the past is not a guarantee for what will work for us in the future. And that we can choose to rest on our laurels and what has worked in the past, but there's a risk associated with that. So the acknowledgement that we need to look to the future, to build on what has worked. And I would challenge us to be reflective and say, what's not working? And do we need to do that anymore? So, which leads me to, how does that impact us, the investment committee? The things that I've taken away is clearly there will be policy suggestions for changes that we will have to understand and eventually adopt. there is likely to be a request for resources and the approval of a budget. We have to understand what those resources needs will be and the rationale. And then thirdly would be governance and oversight. And how does governance and oversight, what does that look like in the future? Does that change? So I think that's the intersection at a bare minimum for us what's our ownership over this and how does it affect us from policy, from resources, and governance and oversight. So we look forward to participating appropriately with our staff and our consultants in moving forward with this shared vision towards the future. It's terrific. Thank you very much. We are going to take our 15-minute break and we'll be back at 10:55. Thank you. Right, we're going to go to the open session semi-annual reports. We'll start with Steve and Stephanie from Makita. Welcome, Steve. Welcome, Stephanie.
Good to be here. Thank you. We'll have a few slides that'll guide our conversation here. Okay, just as a refresher for the investment committee, one of the roles that Makita plays for you is monitoring investment activity that the staff executes under delegated authority on your behalf. While we engage with staff on more or less a day-to-day basis, twice a year we do these deeper dive reviews, which involve what effectively are RFIs and questionnaires that staff formally completes and provides to Makita, and interviews that we conduct with senior staff members at CalSTRS for each asset class. These semi-annual reviews that we put together for you are the summary of all of that work that Makita does twice each year. So with that, at the highest level, in terms of key takeaways, staff continues to perform at a high level. Performance, as Scott noted before, for 2025 was strong at 13%. And over the trailing 3, 5, and 10-year periods, the portfolio has outpaced the actuarial assumed rate of return. The return relative to the policy benchmark exceeded that benchmark over all trailing periods. Relative to the State Street median public pension plan over $10 billion, the portfolio has lagged by small margins over time. That's largely been a function of the somewhat more conservative structure of the CalSTRS asset allocation compared to other plans. And relative to the reference portfolio, which is comprised of 70% global equities and 30% fixed income, the portfolio has lagged in recent years simply because the global equity markets have rallied strongly after 2022. And the CalSTRS portfolio is invested in private market assets in addition to global equities and fixed income. But over the 5 and 10-year period, the portfolio has outperformed the reference portfolio as well. And the final thing I want to highlight in terms of overall fund performance is, as noted in your more detailed material that you've received, the portfolio's returns on a risk-adjusted basis have outperformed each of these indexes over long periods as well. And as you know, we focus a lot of our attention on risk management and monitoring risk management in addition to returns as well.
Alrighty, good morning. So taking a look at CalSTRS' two largest asset classes, we have global equity on the left and fixed income on the right. And we don't single them out because they're most important. Every asset class is very important in your own special ways. But collectively, these two areas make up over half of CalSTRS' portfolio. So they're going to be meaningful drivers of total fund performance. So acclimating ourselves to the tables here, we show for both asset classes the 5 and 10-year unadjusted and risk-adjusted returns for the asset class measured against comparable benchmarks. We have the policy benchmark for each of the asset classes, broad-based industry benchmarks, as well as a peer group median. And the 5 and 10-year periods are important because they typically show us what a market cycle would look like, and then you can assess success or lack thereof from those two time periods. So starting with global equity on the left-hand side here, you can see that at 11.1 and 11.9 over the 5 and 10-year time periods, this asset class has outpaced all of the comparable measures on the page here. When we dig into the details, these positive marks are stemming from all of the underlying regional exposures within the portfolio. So your global, your US, non-US developed, emerging markets equity, each of these areas have produced positive absolute and relative returns over the trailing time periods. What the bottom table tells us is that global equity has been able to produce these superior returns while taking on a lower level of risk, and we measure that through the Sharpe ratio. You can see that from that measurement, your portfolio continues to outpace all those measures as well. Moving to fixed income on the right, this asset class also produces strong results over the trailing period, outperforming the majority of the comparables here, the one exception being that peer group median. That's because the peer group is going to have a higher allocation to non-investment grade securities, whereas you have a higher allocation to investment grade fixed income. So ultimately, what these positive marks tell us is that staff continues to execute in a complex and highly uncertain market landscape, and that comes in the form of staying disciplined. So not exposing CalSTRS to unnecessary risk in order to achieve that higher level of return, which, given your size, it is a credible risk, which makes the positive Sharpe metrics that we see on the page even that much more important.
So next, we're going to cover two big risks that Makita observes in the marketplace, and we will discuss these and a few more in more detail in closed session as well. And to be fair to us, these decks were put together before the Iran conflict a couple of days ago, so I'll mention a few words about that as well. So what I want to highlight is, as you all know, there's a multitude of risks always in the capital markets, and your staff has committees and processes that it has developed to identify and evaluate risks in a real-time on a real-time basis. The two risks we have here are potentially longer-term risks and may be kind of relevant as a committee with staff. You'll be over the next 2 years addressing asset allocation in the portfolio again. So these are longer-term issues. The first one we highlighted at the last semi-annual review as well, which is just the ongoing valuation of the U.S. Equity market. The chart that you see here is what we in the industry call the Shiller price-to-earnings ratio. It's the current price of the U.S. equity market divided by the trailing 10 years earnings of stocks. And the trailing 10-year earnings is used in this measure because that smooths out any business cycle impacts from earnings. This data has a lot of prominence in the industry because while you can't forecast future returns, this data does have some information content with respect to the general order of magnitude of equity returns over the long term, 10 or 20 years. And all else being equal, the higher the current price relative to dollar earnings in the stock market, the lower the forward-looking expected returns of equities. We're at a level now pretty similar to where the market was on a valuation perspective in 2021 and in 1999, higher than where we were in 1929. These are extreme levels of valuation in the market. We've talked about this before as a risk factor. The extreme levels of valuation in the market have really been driven recently by predominantly AI and Mag 7 stocks that have increased in value either because market participants believe that allocating capital investment towards data centers and AIs will pay off in future earnings in the future, or companies that are going to be integrating AI into their processes will expand margins and improve profitability. We'll see. That's just the forecast of the markets right now. But from a policy perspective, we bring it up because as you go through the asset allocation process, you'll see that all else equal, a higher current value of equities means a lower forward-looking return for stocks, which is consistent with a practice across the industry. Okay. The second risk I wanted to highlight briefly was sort of the ongoing erosion of independence and confidence in government data and decision making. The Federal Reserve's actions have been increasingly politicized over the last year, roughly. And the government shutdown, which happened back in the fall, created delays and gaps in economic data that are still working their way through the system. None of these today represent significant risks to the market, but they are certainly potential risks to keep an eye on in the future. The way economists and financial professors, financial professionals think about these types of risks to the confidence of the capital markets is through what we call risk premiums. One of the reasons that the U.S. has been the largest, most liquid capital market in the world is the general confidence that global market participants have in the U.S. Decision-making processes with respect to monetary policy and fiscal policy, and transparency with respect to data. To the extent that these institutions erode in trust and transparency, it's reasonable to expect that market participants will begin pricing in risk premia to different markets, which effectively means that the price that companies have to pay to borrow capital, the price the government has to pay to borrow capital from the capital markets will be higher than it would be otherwise. And that's why it's a significant long-term risk. America's benefited significantly from relatively low interest rates, liquid capital markets, and this has the potential for eroding that confidence. The final thing I want to highlight is just a quick comment on recent activity in the Middle East. If you're like me and us, you're probably a little surprised the markets haven't gone down more than they have. I ascribe that mostly because looking around the table, most of us grew up in a different world where the Middle East was far more important to global oil markets, or particularly U.S. oil markets, than it is today. That being said, I want to give credit to staff for its efforts to communicate quickly and efficiently on the evolving issues in the Middle East, meeting to discuss impacts on the portfolio, meeting to discuss possible portfolio adjustments, and that's the type of activity that you want to see your staff taking during periods of like this. So I want to make that one comment during open session. And I'll hand it over to Steph now for conclusions.
So some concluding thoughts to put a bow on it here. Performance for your portfolio continues to be strong. Staff is focused on executing at a very high level. And as board members, committee, things that you should be considerate of in the near term and longer. One is going to be the development of the total fund management team. The implementation of the one fund approach and how that converges with the strategic asset allocation process. And then finally, with the growth of the complexity of the portfolio, maintaining that North Star in evaluating the success or lack thereof. So we're happy to address questions now. We'll also dive into each of those areas during closed session, but I will pause here.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Steve. Ms. Hendricks, then Mr. Juarez, then Ms. Gallegos. Ms. Hendricks.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Stephanie and Steve, for your perspective. It's always helpful to hear how you view what we're doing. I guess I'm just picking up on words today, volatility and complexity. And obviously with what's happened this last week, volatility just feels, like you said, Steve, you don't see the markets right now reacting. Curious obviously we don't know what things will look like in the next couple of weeks or how that unfolds. But I wonder if you could just comment a little bit about how you see our team, maybe a little more color on how our team's navigating the volatility right now. And maybe for future, Scott, that might be between board meetings or something, if there's insight that you think would be helpful for the investment committee to hear. I know we're long-term investors, big picture, and we don't always react to things, but obviously I just assume that the markets are going to be hit in some way at some time. So could you just kind of maybe comment a little more on how you see our team navigating that volatility with
sure.
a complex team?
Yeah, and on the latter point, just to highlight, with the small exception of 2022, where we saw markets go down, and a few weeks in 2020 during COVID, the markets haven't experienced a real bear market in 15 years. And so it's just always good to bear that in mind. The investment experience that investors have had over the last 15 years has been rosier on average than one would have expected. And that doesn't always last forever. So whether it's the Middle East conflict, whether it's 15 other factors we could come up with, or the infinite number of factors we couldn't come up with, at some point there will be volatility and downturns in the market. And your staff, from our perspective, your staff is very aware of that, and from a cultural perspective, integrates risk management well into its processes. I will just say from a personal perspective, I started receiving emails from your staff on Saturday and Sunday about perspectives on the markets and futures markets in the U.S. and oil markets, and so I can certainly highlight the degree of engagement and communication that went on in real time. But maybe I'll ask Scott to just say a few words about kind of the internal processes on Monday and Tuesday.
Yeah, no, thanks, Stephen. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak to this as well. The public markets, Geraldine and myself, were texting each other and following and monitoring developments all, throughout the weekend. I didn't think it was important to meet first thing because I wanted the folks on the trading desks assessing the situation. So I scheduled a meeting at 9:30 with our risk allocation committee. That's our tactical committee. And I could give you some insights there that, as Steve was saying, I think we're all somewhat shocked that there hasn't been more market movement, but we have to know that the market is pricing efficiently what it knows. There is a lot of uncertainty here that the market can't really price in, right? Nobody knows what the new regime what the reaction function will be, right? We're beginning to see that. But as more of that, unfolds, we'll be then able to discern, and something obvious might come up. There was nothing for us to do with the portfolio because we felt that we were positioned well, relatively neutral to our asset allocation, a little bit overweight some growth assets, but we had moved our diversifying portfolio back into balance, back to equal weight. We're holding ample liquidity, given our focus on U.S. and the U.S. being a net exporter of oil. Who this really affects, if you think about higher oil prices, if oil should hit 100, if we should have a long in conflict, that's going to hit the net importers of that oil through the Strait of Hormuz. That's emerging Asia, it's India, it's Japan, it's South Korea, it's China. Those are the areas that we're watching because something might become obvious. We saw the cost be down 12%, for example, last night. If that falls, 40, 50%, it might be interesting for us to diversify the portfolio more geographically, but be buying some of those equities. So I think right now, with the uncertainty, and I don't care, who you talk to, if they tell you they know what's going to happen, you should probably walk the other way. Right? So we're looking for that opportunity. And we're spending a lot of time valuing, I hope that something doesn't present itself because that would mean something went, bad into the terms of the conflict, giving us the opportunity to buy discounted assets. But so just to give you that, the staff is monitoring this very closely. And, the RAC meeting on Monday was not a scheduled meeting. We put it on the calendar, obviously, to make sure that we were getting the best views across the organization, input into our positioning. But we'll continue to do that. I mean, that's something that, I appreciate from our team, all of the work that goes on, throughout the weekend, throughout the evenings, tracking global markets. Anyways, I feel very confident. Hopefully you feel confident from that too, given my seat.
Scott.
So Mr. Juarez, then Ms. Gallegos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So going back to your Fed independence concerns, has Makita, do you have any sense about what type of chairman Kevin Warsh might be and whether or not Trump having his own person in there will settle the issue and maybe have him back off a little?
We don't know any more than others. I would say our perspective, like many others, is if Trump's interest was to get the Fed to lower interest rates, irrespective of data in the economy, Warsh was an unusual selection. Warsh has been on the Federal Reserve before. He has a track record. And one of his biggest objectives when he was a member of the Fed previously was to roll back or reduce the size of the Fed balance sheet, which is tightening monetary policy, not loosening it. So he surprised the markets because he's not known as a dove. He's said dovish things recently, maybe to get appointed, but his track record isn't as a dove. The second thing is the Federal Reserve, and you all can appreciate this because you're trustees. As an institution, they have a requirement to vote monetary policy based on the legislated objectives of the institution itself, which is maintaining full employment and controlling inflation. There's obviously some wiggle room there, but you'll find a lot more variability in the personal beliefs of individual members of the Federal Reserve than you will in their actual voting record because of that. So our general sense, and I think the market's general sense, is one person doesn't control all the votes on the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve as an institution will continue to be very data dependent on tracking its policy. While the Federal Reserve has a dual mandate of inflation and unemployment, it seems very focused on prioritizing getting inflation back down to zero. They view inflation as having asymmetric risks if they don't achieve that objective. And that's why the market has priced in, relatively fewer rate cuts for 2026 than they had initially. Scott?
I just want to take an opportunity to talk about this yin and yang and the volatility, because if you just think about the basic math, if we're producing $5 trillion of income in the country, we got $7 trillion of a deficit. With 6 times our GDP is the debt, we're rolling $9 trillion a year. We have $1 trillion of interest payments on that $5 trillion of income. The interest rates are more than just table stakes. And so you've got this like, what are we doing with the deficit and the interest rates versus the Fed's mandate around what could that cause in terms of inflation? This is why, one of the conclusions, a lot of we can speculate what's going to happen, but that's bound to cause volatility in interest rates because of these great forces now coming together. So that's one of the things I was trying to communicate is that one thing we know for sure is that this is going to be more volatile. Again, opportunities but risk in that for the team. We can create a more dynamic process. It will help facilitate the opportunity part of it and the risk part of it.
Thank you.
Ms. Gallegos.
I don't even know where to start. The one thing that I did that came to mind earlier is when we were talking about the markets and this sort of lack of response to the crisis, or maybe a very shortened response to the crisis. The capital markets assumptions that we will be using for asset allocation, whether they're developed in-house or by Makita, are we in consensus? Are our numbers in or out of consensus in terms of what we see long-term in the equity market and then also in the private equity market? Because I think you're seeing some valuation pressure there as well. Or is this sort of these rose-colored glasses, both short-term and long-term?
Just speaking to your processes in the past with capital market assumptions, your staff recommends capital market assumptions to you as part of the process, and in doing that, they receive input from Makita and others. So there's multiple data points that they get, which ensures that the assumptions are going to be sort of in the fairway of others in the marketplace. And I'll just I'll comment from our perspective there. There tends to be some variety in the capital market assumptions across different consulting firms and asset managers and public pension plans. Those are the 3 entities that tend to create them. In an absolute sense, there tends to be less variety in relative expected returns. The difference between public equity expected returns and private equity returns is pretty consistent, or the difference between bonds and stocks. So, but I'd say generally most models are looking at the same sort of factors, and as a consequence, most models provide outputs that are close enough where there isn't kind of major disagreement.
Thank you.
One follow-on comment, I think, Deborah, interesting to think about it this way too, is we came from a world with a narrow distribution curve that might have been skewed a little bit to the right with zero interest rates. And we're now looking at a fatter distribution on both ends of it, which has implications too on how we allocate our assets. And as I think about it, we can diversify our portfolio better and more through some of the things we're thinking about in the one fund approach. So sort of more to come there. But as we think about the different distribution we're looking at, I think it has broad implications, not only in terms of the capital assumptions, but the shape of that curve.
Thanks.
Mr. Diamini.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you so much, Stephen and Stephanie, for the presentation, and Scott for the answers. I'm drawing some through lines between the presentation from this morning around the shared vision and looking at historical performance, the tactics for the next 5 to 10 years. And I think the question I probably have for Makita is the risk we are experiencing in this moment unusually high if we look at the last 5 to 10, 15 years, as you mentioned? And second question is should the organization's posture be more defensive, or should it be continue to be offensive tactically? Where are we in that space? And I'm drawing on that point you made, which is that for the last 15 years, investors have had a really good run. Yeah. And so where should we be now, knowing that that run is probably extended?
Yeah. But markets more or less follow a random walk, even when they're highly valued. So very difficult to forecast returns over the next sort of 3 to 5 years. What can be said with confidence is that we're not at a market bottom. Nothing's cheap in the markets today. And so as a consequence, the likelihood of outsized positive returns is likely lower than it otherwise would be. And because stocks are priced, and not just stocks, but all equity investments and credit investments, any investment that you make that involves some degree of economic risk associated with it, they're all priced more or less to perfection at this point. Like everything has to go right to produce the expected returns that one would expect out of public equities, private equity, high yield bonds, all of those instruments. So for the last 3 years, everything's gone right. And so we've continued to have really strong returns, and everything may continue to go right, and strong returns could continue. But it's we're certainly closer to an environment today where prudence would dictate cautiousness as opposed to aggressiveness. And your portfolio is already invested with a degree of caution. So I don't highlight that to in any way sort of advocate for a change in how you're investing, but really just to highlight that you invest through cycles, you set policy to have a portfolio that can produce returns over the long term with a degree of volatility that you can stomach as a board, and your portfolio today reflects that.
Thank you. I'll just add, and I appreciate, Scott, that in every conversation we've had around this topic, you always emphasize the need for diversification, and that's our best way to mitigate downside risk. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Diamini. I don't see anyone else. We'll move to the real estate semi-annual. Thank you, Steve. Thanks, Stephanie. Taylor, Ben, welcome. Again, a reminder, this is open session real estate semi-annual, and we'll have opportunity in closed session to get into some more of the specifics.
Good morning, Ben Maslin and Taylor Mammon from Arcelco Fund Advisors. We're your real estate consultant. I'll talk about the performance for the real estate portfolio, turn it over to Taylor to talk about the market, and then we'll dive deeper on each of the issues in closed session as well. So going to our first slide on performance. Over the long term, your portfolio has continued to outperform. You've beat the Odyssey Index, which is your benchmark, by over 100 basis points over the 10-year period. Over the short term, however, which you can see from the left-hand side in the one-year return, you have underperformed, and you're about 300 basis points behind the benchmark for the one-year period. This is primarily due to two reasons. The first is, and these have been highlighted in the past by us in prior semi-annual reports. The first one is an over-allocation to office properties, in particular life science properties, where you are above the benchmark there, and you've also taken on development risk, so a higher risk profile with that portion of the portfolio, and life science properties have underperformed relative to other property types. The other is an underallocation to industrial properties, which really were the best performing property type over the last 5 years, and so the combination of those two has led to underperformance. Going forward, we do think it will take some time for the life science portfolio to burn off. There will be some write-downs over the next 2 years, which will impact performance over the next couple of years. And we'll discuss this in greater detail in closed session as well. Just looking at the compliance of the portfolio, you're in compliance across all categories outlined in your investment policy statement. The one thing to draw attention to is that left-hand column, which we've drawn attention to in prior semi-annual reports as well, in that you have a target real estate allocation of 15%. You're at about 12.5%. And again, this is due to two reasons. One is that real estate values have declined over the last 3 years, while equity values have increased over the last 3 years. And that has brought the real estate allocation down. As Taylor will talk about, it's not a bad time to be underallocated based on where the real estate markets are and having dry powder to the sector. And then this just highlights what I discussed on the first slide on performance, that the overallocation to office, underallocation to industrial in particular is what has driven, to a certain extent, their performance over the past year. And with that, I'll turn it over to Taylor to talk about the market. Sure, it's a subset of the office portfolio, and we have greater detail in the slide in your materials as well to show that.
Great, thank you, and good morning. Really consistent with my commentary from the last couple of semi-annual reports that we've provided, the real estate market fundamentals have, depending on property type, either bottomed out or have continued to improve over time. That's really driven by continued solid demand for many property types or emerging demand for some property types, combined with either already limited new construction, constraining supply, or very rapidly declining construction, as we see in this and the subsequent slides. That is leading to a inflection point for values at this point. The lines on this slide indicate values within the NPI, the National Property Index. These are index values determined by appraisals. If you're looking at actual transaction values, we hit the bottom a couple of years ago, most likely. And the final slide here, which again, the most material when it comes to long-term performance of real estate, is the fairly dramatic decline in creation of new supply in real estate. So we're fairly confident at this stage that we've hit the trough in terms of both real estate pricing as well as fundamentals. What this means, and we see this in the data as well, is increasing transaction activity as investors increase in confidence that their new investments will perform as expected, and therefore liquidity. It's easier to sell assets that you've wanted to sell, buy assets that you've wanted to buy, giving CalSTRS and other institutional investors the opportunities to position their portfolios as they want to position them for outperformance over the next several years. This has been very challenging over the past couple of years as liquidity has been fairly limited. A very different story than the conversation we were just having regarding the public equities market, where real estate has had 3 years of decline and is poised to continue to start to outperform. We do want to highlight risks, as always, to this scenario. the recovery in particular may be subdued because of, in particular, prior to relative to prior recoveries, due to a few factors. Interest rates and therefore the valuation metrics used in real estate valuations may not decline as much as we've seen in the past. We may not be able to get those tailwinds from broadly improving capital market fundamentals. And second, we're seeing threats to demand that we maybe haven't seen in the past. Certainly on the immigration side in the United States, where the vast majority of CalSTRS portfolio is allocated, we're seeing dramatic slowdown in immigration, both because of proactive activities by the current administration, as well as the residual or the domino effects of those activities, leading to less immigration than we've ever experienced as a country, which does not support the demand for all types of real estate over the long term. And second, we are seeing more labor market softness over the past couple of quarters than the GDP growth would indicate. That may be a cyclical recycling of labor. It may have to do with AI. And certainly AI may continue to threaten labor markets broadly throughout the economy, which may dampen demand relative to what we've seen in the past. So looking out for these risks, we nevertheless continue to believe that after a couple of years of continued downturn in fundamentals as well as values, now is a good time to be positioning portfolios for the future. With that, I will pause and we can respond to questions.
Don't see, Ms. Hendricks.
You just kind of teed it up, Taylor, in terms of, can you just finish you said positioning the portfolio for the future. Can you maybe give us a little insight into what you think that would look like for real estate?
Yeah, sure. And I believe we have slides in closed session that
Sure.
describe.
And whatever you can share in open session or
of course.
Whatever you
and so we have some more specifics in closed session to share, kind of where the most recent investments have been going, where dispositions are occurring. I don't think that it would be a surprise to note that it involves shifting the allocation from office to industrial and residential, in addition to some of the asset or real estate property types that are considered alternatives or niches that have strong long-term demand fundamentals around them as well, like seniors housing, self-storage, even potentially data centers as well.
Okay, great. That's helpful. Thank you so much, Taylor.
Sure. Thank you, Taylor. Thank you, Ben. We'll have more in closed session. The next semi-annual report is the private equity, John Haggerty and Ryan. Welcome, John, and welcome, Ryan. Any public comments for 5B?
There's no public comment for 5B.
Okay. Thank you. So 5C, private equity. Welcome, John. Welcome, Ryan.
Great. Thank you. So it's a good report card for this semi-annual report, which ends the period September of last year. The one thing that's notable as we went through the report and prepared it was that because you have one of your benchmarks stocks, which is the MSCI ACWI plus 150 basis points, you do see for a long-term period of time, the 10-year period, where the performance of private equity is below that of that benchmark. The rest of the report card is quite strong. And so what we thought we'd do is start our remarks with a discussion of the asset class, because some of the things we've been talking about have begged the question about the role of the asset class and its appropriateness on a go-forward basis. So here you see the projected returns. Steve McCourt had mentioned earlier that the absolute numbers change from time to time, but there's quite a bit of consistency in the spread that exists between different asset classes. And here what I would call your attention to is the right-hand bar chart, where private equity continues to be projected to be the highest returning asset class for the long term, whether the 10-year or you're looking at the 20-year period of time. And the gap to U.S. equity, which is the benchmark, or the gap to global equity, is over 220 basis points. So As I've mentioned many meetings in the past, this is the thing that we want to pay attention to, is the premium return that you expect to get out of investing in a liquid asset class that's very similar in terms of its risks to your stock portfolio. And then when you look on a historical basis, it's also an interesting story.
Yeah, so in the previous slide, you saw the premium expected from private equity relative to other asset classes. Here we wanted to demonstrate historically the outperformance of private equity relative to public equity markets over longer term time horizons. So the chart on the left here shows you a time-weighted analysis, 10-year rolling returns of private equity performance, and you can see that compared to the S&P 500, a small cap stock index, and also the MSCI World Index. And you can see over this 25-year period, private equity has, in the majority of the time, outperformed public equity markets. In fact, private equity outperformed in 97 of the last 100 quarters. The chart on the right illustrates that the outperformance of private equity occurs in particular when public equity market returns have been lower. And this points to the diversification benefits of your private equity allocation. So to the right-hand side of the chart, you can see in years where public equity returns are greater than 10%, as they have been in recent 2-3 years, private equity has, the outperformance of private equity has ranged between 87 and 162 basis points over the S&P. But in contrast, when the S&P has returned less than 5%, you can see that private equity outperformance has ranged between 5.5% to 9% returns above the S&P. So this demonstrates how your private equity allocation benefits the portfolio, in particular during times when public equity markets are underperforming.
Here's another take on the private equity asset class, and it has to do with the opportunity set. This is a consideration of every possible thing that you as a pension fund could invest in. And there's a clear trend for private equity to increase as part of the opportunity set. The market continues to grow. If you just look on a numbers basis, there are 215 companies that are backed by private equity that you could own within your private equity program. And that compares to less than 9,000 stocks that happen to be in the benchmark that you use for your global equity portfolio. And we think this will continue to grow. That's 24 times the amount. The projections for assets under management are also quite strong for the industry. So 11% per year for the next 5 years is what's widely expected to be the growth in the private equity industry. I would say furthermore, there are many other reasons that people make an allocation to private equity. We've covered them at prior meetings, but this is exposure, of course, to smaller sized companies and to startups and a number of things that can serve as a diversifier, things that you cannot get exposure to in a liquid form. So back to some of the problems that have us talking about the asset class in general. Globally, over half of the investments in private equity portfolios have been held for more than 4 years. And so this is a significant kind of backlog this represents within the private equity market. And we've discussed that. This is just a different metric for looking at it. Now the median is about 6 years. If you're looking at your own portfolio, it's perhaps the same, where a private equity manager would expect in the original underwriting to sell after 3 to 5 years. Now it's up at the 6. It's the median, the average for that universe. And you're seeing that with the slowdown in the distributions. And it has a lot to do with what we've talked about in other sessions, where interest rates have gone up, and that's caused an issue for coming up with a transaction value that both parties can agree upon. I will say on the subject of multiples increasing, usually you can see this as a negative sign for any market. Prices go up, it reduces your expected return. But in a sense, when I look at this figure of 11.3 times EBITDA last year and 11.8 times in the last year, I see that as some support for the industry. Whenever there's a slowdown in transactions, you can worry that valuations are going down. But there's a lot of support for the valuations that exist in the market. Those are actual transactions. There might be a slight bias on the upward side to that because mostly quality assets have been trading in the last year.
And another important trend to note is increased competition within the industry. This has really been driven by the increased availability of capital. Large institutional allocators like sovereign wealth funds have been increasing allocations to private equity. And we've also seen the entrance of retail investors into the private equity markets over the last decade. And retail investors have really accelerated over the last 5 years their participation. Today, they still represent a relatively small portion, less than 10% of private market participation globally. But retail investors are expected to grow their participation over time in the space. And as we've already touched on earlier, just to highlight the increased scrutiny around private equity performance, particularly given strong public equity performance. What we're seeing is that institutional allocators, despite this, are not changing their allocations to private equity. Survey of 300 LPs globally found that 70% are either maintaining or planning to increase their allocations.
So execution of your team. Past 10 years period of time, you're well ahead of the custom State Street Index, which is another way of saying that the selections that your team has made within the private equity market have been superior to a broader universe of the same investments. So that's a strong factor. What I also noted at the beginning, though, is that relative to the custom benchmark, which is related to more asset allocation decisions, it's slightly below. So it's 0.4, 40 basis points below per year on that 10-year period of time. And note that that is a global stock benchmark plus 150 basis points. So you still have beat the global stock market on an absolute basis without that premium for that period of time. And then something we show from time to time, I think is a very intuitive measure of the success of the program over long periods of time. And this is a since inception period calculation. And what it tells you is what did you get out of every dollar that you put into the program? And a PME analysis can be interpreted this way. So the result is 1.18 for relative to the MSCI Equity Index. It means that for every dollar that you contributed to the private equity program over time, you got $1.18 back. And if you want to compare that to the same global stock market plus a liquidity premium of 150 basis points, you put in $1, you got $1.13 back. So clearly you've been paid back for this program historically.
Here we have performance of each strategy in your private equity portfolio. It's important to note and highlight here, you can see 76% of the program's NAV is in the buyout strategy. So buyouts are going to have a strong impact on overall portfolio performance. And you can see that your buyout portfolio continues to outperform the index across all time periods. Performance was also strong over the last 6 months. It was 1.5% higher for the buyout strategy than reported in the previous semi-annual. Other strategies in the portfolio similarly performed well over the last 6 months. Venture is your second largest allocation at approximately 9%. You can see that trailing 1-year returns were 18.9%. And the venture portfolio is outperforming the benchmark in the 1 and 3 year time periods. Debt related is your third largest strategy at 6%, and the performance of that strategy also improved over the last 6 months. And that strategy is now outperforming the benchmark across 1, 3, and 5 year timeframes.
Your co-investments have beat fund investments by an average of 280 basis points per year over the last 10 years. This program is successful relative to investing in the fund format. The proportion of co-investments within the portfolio has gone up just a bit, from 24 to 25%. And the ambition for this upcoming year is to have a full third of the portfolio, 33%, deployed in the co-investment format, no fee, no carry.
Performance across geographic exposures has broadly been strong relative to geographic benchmarks. So North America represents the majority, approximately 70% of portfolio exposure, and that's outperforming the benchmark in the 3 and 5 year periods, and is pretty close to the benchmark in the 1 and the 10 year periods as well. And then across all time periods, your exposure outside of North America has been strong. Since inception, you'll see that the portfolio outside of North America has beat the benchmark by actually 2.5%. And this shows you your investments by commitments by vintage year in the portfolio. In the second half of last year, staff deployed just over $4 billion, and that includes both funds and co-investments. As a whole last year, the team was targeting to deploy $8 billion as part of the pacing, and they were successful in doing that. And as you all know, this year that pacing target has been increased slightly to $9 billion, split $6 billion to fund investments and $3 billion to co-investments. And that's designed to help maintain your private equity allocation in the portfolio, which you can see on the next slide is currently about 15%. And across all sub-strategies, all of these are well within the interim targets that you have for the portfolio and the target ranges.
So in summary, the program's outperforming the private equity benchmark. It's diversified, compliant with the guidelines, and set to commit 1/3 of its commitment budget to low cost, no fee, no carry co-investments in the upcoming year. The asset class, however, continues to underperform stocks and produce liquidity at a rate that's far below its historic norms. Those are the things that we're paying attention to.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Ryan. No one's in the queue. I know we'll have some questions in closed session. Thank you. That brings us to item 6. Yeah, I apologize. Thank you, Sharon. I appreciate it. You gave me a heads up. I know we have a member of the public who would like to speak to 5C. Alyssa? Thanks, Sharon.
Thank you so much. Alyssa Giacchino with the Private Equity Stakeholder Project. The private equity industry is facing increasing scrutiny as returns drag. The standard buyout playbook of loading portfolio companies with debt, fees, and aggressive cost cutting continues to pose risks to workers, communities, and investors. This board has heard frequent testimony from workers in industries harmed by private equity, including numerous comments in January on abuses under GP's CalSTRS invests with. We urge you to adopt a policy for responsible workforce management as an engagement and risk management tool. Peer pension funds managing over $1 trillion in retirement dollars have labor policies, including New York State and Maryland. With 48% of CalSTRS portfolio exposed to private markets, you are well positioned to adopt policy that ensures private equity managers are creating value through productive and proactive workforce management. One clear indicator of private equity damage is when portfolio companies succumb to their debt burden. In 2025, PE firms played a role in 54% of the 35 largest U.S. corporate bankruptcies with $1 billion in liabilities or more, according to our latest bankruptcy tracker. PE-backed companies have other signals of financial strain. One of the companies tracked by the S&P that pursued distressed debt exchanges in 2025, at least 44% were PE-backed. Distressed exchanges enable companies to avoid bankruptcy court, but the consequences often mirror those of bankruptcy, including layoffs, store closures, and service disruptions, just with far less transparency. Packers Sanitation is one such example. You will recall the child labor scandal that erupted in 2022. CalSTRS was directly exposed to the Slaughterhouse Sanitation Company through a $500 million commitment to Blackstone Core Equity Partners. This board expressed dismay about school children working unlawfully cleaning meatpacking plants. In March 2023, the New York State Comptroller sent Blackstone a letter saying, quote, "The alleged practices are abhorrent and could imperil the reputation and financial success of PSSI," unquote. Indeed, for 3 years after the allegations came to light, Packers struggled with lost business and looming debt, ultimately handing the business over to lenders in December 2025. meaning Blackstone's core equity LPs lost out. S&P said the change in ownership, quote, could aid Packers in moving beyond the Department of Labor incident, unquote. Packers is an indisputable example of the material financial impact of its failure to responsibly manage its workforce. We urge CalSTRS to adopt labor principles to ensure your general partners are properly managing risks. Thank you.
Thank you, Alyssa. Item 6 on the agenda is the consent agenda, the approval of the minutes. Without objection, okay, the minutes have been approved. 7 is the information request. Scott, do we have any information requests?
Yes, for item 4, the committee requested a future discussion on the investment data team and future growth and training plans for data and technology.
Okay. Thank you, Scott. And item 8 is the draft agenda for the next committee. Scott Chen, anything you want to highlight?
Just a couple of items. One is bringing back the shared vision. We'll talk a little bit more about quantitative goals, which I think will make a lot of the committee members happy. The other element to double click on is the net zero and DIMI annual updates.
Thanks, Scott. So brings us to our lunch break. We're going to break for lunch until 1 p.m. And then we'll be going into closed session. Closed session today will be, the first portion of closed session will be here in the boardroom, where we'll get the semi-annual reports from our consultants, as well as some appropriate exchanges with the proper staff members as well for each asset class. So we won't just simply hear from the consultants today. There will be opportunities to ask specific questions of the appropriate staff members from those asset classes. Once we go through those semi-annual reports in closed session, the second portion of closed session will be back in the board's lunchroom with a smaller a group of staff and advisors. So we'll be back at 1 o'clock in closed session. The public, we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you, everyone.